Hello and a very warm welcome to Skillsoft presents ETStudio's HRConnect in association with ETHR World. I'm your host Hemanshi Tewari, and in this session we're going to talk about future-ready workforce. We're going to talk about the skills-first approach that organizations are now taking, and for this magnificent panel, we are joined in by, of course, Shirin Sehgal, who is the Chief People Officer at PwC. We are also joined in by Bhavna, Batra, who is Vice President People at S&P Global, Rajiv, Naithani, Chief People Officer at Infogain, and Ankur, Gupta, Vice President Marketing at Skillsoft. Now, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. And I want to start this session by setting the context. See, we are in the digital era, right? The digital landscape is constantly evolving, right? What future-ready workforce mean to you? Like, how do you define a future-ready workforce? I'll start with you, Shirin.
Thank you, Hemanshi. I think, future is as ambiguous as it can be. And that's why what you need in future is something which you have to predict. And predictability comes from assessing the market. And for a firm like ours, which is in professional services, what we hear from our clients, what the clients need for future, what is our advice basis the government policies, the economic and the climate downturns or the upturns that we see, I think those kind of interfaces and environmental inputs help us predict skills that will be needed for future. I mean, do you need a geologist doing analytics in future? Maybe yes. Or do you need an architect doing technology in future? Maybe yes. So having said that, I think the weird combinations is going to be the future, if I can put it in a little more colloquial way. But I think assessing and predicting the market is something which is needed to really look at what is needed for future in terms of skill sets.
All right, thank you so much for that insight. And same question to you, Bhavna. How do you define a future-ready workforce? You know, we don't know, like we know nothing about future, and technology is rapidly evolving day by day, and we know nothing what's going to come tomorrow or day after, right? So how do you define future-ready workforce?
Yeah, and it's interesting because we speak about technology disruption, but that frankly is just one aspect of disruption. You look at environment and nature and the kind of disruptions that we are seeing there. You look at politics and economic realities and the kind of disruption that we are seeing there. So I think the beauty of the future is that it is evolving on multiple fronts, right? And therefore the implications of that I see are many, but the couple that I'll point out are one, skills. If data is the oil of this century, I think skills are the wealth of the wealthy, right? And therefore, this constant evolution in skills is something that I definitely see as being a predominant characteristic of a future-ready workforce. The second thing that I see is the traditional boundaries that used to be there, that so-and-so is a finance professional, marketing professional, HR professional, operations professional. I think those are blurring. At the end of the day, we are all in the business of business. And how do we really appreciate what it is that we want to do? How is it that we're going to do, and leverage the power of our ecosystems to add that value with the table stakes of whatever functional expertise we bring in? I think that's the second characteristic. And the third characteristic that I will say is that from being people to people, it'll be people to machines and technology, right? And building that comfort, because by the way, I know there's a lot of hype about how technology is going to take away jobs. It's not taking away jobs. It's creating new jobs, right? So how do we, again, to use that same phrase, leverage the power of the ecosystem? The ecosystem now includes technology as a co-enabler. So I think those are a few things that stand out for me.
All right. You rightly said that we are now evolving to skills-first approach, right? And that brings me to my next question to you, Rajiv. Earlier we used to do competency mapping, right? Now the organizations are slowly and steadily moving to the skills-first approach. Not everyone is there, but at least they are visioning themselves to be there in a few years, right? So how have you seen this evolution? How has this evolution been for you as the HR professional in this industry?
So Hemanshi, I come from technology industry. For us, it's always about skills. So we have always lived our life around the skills evolution journey. And before I respond to that, a little bit of context I want to actually add on to what Shirin and Bhavna were sharing. Your prediction for future workforce is always driven basis your experiences. of the recent past as well. And especially in our context today, where since 2020 till now, in 4 years, we have seen 3 different stages of transformation. First, we went into the pandemic, everything became remote, different required skills were needed then. Then we got into great resignation, where demand supply became so skewed, and that resulted into very different kind of workforce engagement, retention, management, etc. And the third is the slow market context. And now what is adding to that is the AI, right, and GI at the same time. Now, when we look at those kind of context, we look at the workforce with the context of what our customers are looking at. And from a customer perspective, the competition is quite intense. So your creativity skill becomes very important, your innovation enterprise skill becomes very important. And because of the context of work from home, remote working and hybrid, the word has come closure. So we have people working from different locations. We have come together in a very virtual way, working together as a Scrum team and a team which is extended team. Now from that team skill perspective, what is more important is how enterprising are you, what is your collaboration aspects, how effectively do you work with people, and those aspects become very important. Now when I look at it from a technology industry perspective with this entire context of evolving perspective for us, the skill requirements are also evolving every time. Now for example, technology is shaping that skill cluster for us completely. Every time we started with social media, we started with mobility, we started with telecom, we started various other skills, and that continued to evolve. And then we said that AI, robotics, now GI, it's going to be making this big disruption for us from a working perspective. Today, our business threat from a tech services perspective is the efficiency which GI will bring. Now that means if we have 10 people working on the technology work, now 4 people may not be required tomorrow. We will deploy agentic, which is going to be the bot-based work, and you don't really need 10 people to work on it. Now, from that context point of view, how effective the rest 6 would be in terms of looking at that the software development which is happening is seamless, and it is actually helping the end product to customer. Now, from customer perspective, how delightful the customer experience is. And the other thing is, it's not about only product development, it's also about overall user experience, the human-centered digital experience, because at the end, when we look at the application, it is about the experience which we go through. So these kind of perspectives have been evolving in technology space, and these skills are actually redefining the way we look at the technology spectrum as a whole.
Yeah, and each technology bring its own kind of skills, right? And this is what we are talking about to make our workforce future ready. And on that case, I'll come to you, Ankur. See, you are from the skills background. You are from the skills industry. How have you seen this evolution of organizations to now approaching to be a skills first company?
No, absolutely. And thank you, Hemanshi. If you really look at, obviously, we come from 25 years of history with content libraries, right? And that's where we started. But today, when you really talk about, and you have heard from the leaders, that they are really focusing on skills and what that skill means, right? For each role, for each person, for each department, for each of those, right? And that is the biggest challenge. And that's where we have seen an evolution that today's workforce, if you want to make it future ready, whether it's different industries have different environments which are coming in, whether it's a competitive play, whether it's efficiencies, but then you have to start defining the set of things which will be very common. And things like learnability, adaptability, agility, a lot of that is so much required because there is so much of disruption which is unknown. And you don't know what, while you will, I remember when I think my first 10 years of my life, the Philip Kotler book in my management works well. But today, all over the last 10, 15 years, what really works is how much I was able to add more technology. And the role of a CMO became like a CMTO or CTMO role, right? So for each of these individual roles or departments, you start really looking at how the disruption is helping or disrupting, or because every disruption really looks at as an opportunity as well. And that's where you have to start looking at from a future readiness perspective that what you have to do as an HR leader, that becomes one of the prime responsibility, while every leader is responsible in an organization, but then you are really driving. And that's what we are helping, so many of our customers in that journey, from a library to, doing a very specific paths. And these are, again, paths which can be very personalized. So the future look like that it might be, no individual is doing the same, going through the same learning path as well. So yeah, that is the future looks like.
Rightly put, at this point in time, even for the CHROs, they have to be technology, like they should know technology, like all the roles, the lines between the roles are slightly blurring now, right? Everyone is a part of that strategic management team, even the CHROs for that matter now, because everyone at the end of the day are working for the larger business objective, right? And on that note, see, Rajiv, you were talking about your technical industry, how skills are rapidly changing and how you're perhaps moving towards the skills first approach, and how the industry has always been this way for years now. But how can you sort of create that culture of continuous learning, because we need to have a culture of continuous learning so that our employees are well versed with the technological disruptions and perhaps there are no or less layoffs.
I think layoffs will still happen. I don't think that will stop because of continuous learning initiatives. So when we talk about continuous learning, we need to really link it with the framework, and one which really resonates with me is 70-20-10. So 70% of the learning is always on the job. So irrespective of what industry you come from, what role you play, you will learn 70% from the job itself. So now, how enriching are you making that? For example, if you're into software development cycle, are you actually making it more simulative as well at the same time? So it's not about code writing, it's actually you have all the tools, frameworks made available, you work in a team environment, collaborating with the team effectively so that you're learning on the job. 20% learning is all about exposure and experience you get with your managers, leaders, mentors, customer interactions. So as a leaders, are you taking your team along to those difficult conversations, for example, because just by observing, they will learn something out of it. And that is really the important 20% learning, because that's shaping the individuals in line with your culture context, right? If suppose you say that you're a very empathetic organization, you're a listening organization, are you demonstrating those behaviors? And how are you inculcating those behaviors so that everybody exhibits the same? And that happens through this 20% learning. 10% learning is all about where individuals are encouraged to really invest on their learning, which is the part of their beyond on the job. It could be picking any book, for example. It could be just going for some certification, which could be beneficial for future, from a future readiness perspective. So that's one part of it. The second continuous learning thing is lead by example, in my view. As a leader, am I actually taking the right action in terms of my own development?
And do I know technology first of all?
Absolutely. So for example, we are rolling out this entire AI orientation framework-based learning for every single person in the company. Now, my team member came to me yesterday from L&D team and said that, can you send an email to entire HR organization asking them to complete this? I said, first I need to complete it. I can't even ask them if I have not done it. So lead by example is very important from a continuous learning perspective. And the third thing in my view is the pull versus push-based learning. Today, come what may, as an organization, we think that, okay, we want X programs to be completed, so push those programs to people. We don't really understand whether those are matching the aspirations and interest of the employees who are looking for those learning interventions or not. And it has to be made pull-based. The good thing is, because of various platforms, whether Skillsoft or various different e-learning platforms, the learning has become accessible anytime, anywhere based, right? That's the beauty of today's context. Now, if that proposition is in place and you have the right enabling continuous learning culture, that gives the edge to employees to really go for the right programs which are relevant for their own development as well as benefit the organization. It has to be mutual. It can't be just for one person. If for example, I'm a HR professional and I say that, okay, I want to learn marketing, but where would it benefit the organization is also important. It's not just about me just getting benefited out of it. So pull has to have impact-based perspective to it as well. That's how I see from a...
And just to add on what Rajiv did say, in terms of, you really look at that push and pull, and that is a combination I think all of you have been using. Obviously, that push is reducing and that push is becoming very compliance driven. And then pull is becoming a lot more about that aspiration and the impact which I can create, because I am now also responsible, or at least organizations giving me an ecosystem for looking at my growth, right? And I have to take certain actions. And I think that is a lot more there in it. But coming back to, your first point in terms of what really is looking at from a behavioral change perspective and a skills perspective, right? I'm a firm believer that while we will lose jobs, but we will add up a lot more jobs, and a lot of data study shows that. And yes, layoff will happen for the people probably who are not adopting and not upskilling. But on the other side, I think it becomes, as our leaders, a very responsibility in terms of really looking at what are these roles which are kind of going away, because there is a data-driven roles, a lot of those are going away. But then human-centric skills are not going, and that is not getting replicated that easily today. Right? I think it'll maybe a decade or more, maybe faster. But then those are the things that how a human and an AI will work together. And I think that is the key of really looking at, while 30% or 40%, I think different predictions from different studies are coming in. But what is required? Because with Excel sheets or with calculators, we have not lost jobs. I think we start doing a lot more. So I think that's where we have to start looking at. And just to add on the humanize, like 20% of what you talked about, now the tools can do it. Like you have a Gen AI which can behave like a human. So when you are learning things through a human earlier, now you can do it through a Gen AI kind of a tool, like Casey is one of them for us, where you start really doing the interaction. You have a safe place to work as well. So I think those are the opportunities that are coming in, and those soft skills, or I would say as power skills, as Bhavna you mentioned in our discussion, is becoming very hard to get. They are the hardest skill because they change behaviors.
But I'll move to you, Shirin, first. They've been talking about learning with purpose, the push and pull strategy. But when it comes to individual learning, of course, the individual career development goals can be different from the larger organizational goal, right? So how do you kind of set that culture or that sort of learning where there's a balance between the individual career goals and also the organizational goals?
Sure. No, I think maybe it's me or maybe it's the environment or the firm I work for, but I have a fairly capitalist view on a lot of things related to all of this, because ultimately we're in the business of making money. So I think I agree with everything, and I think that's the employee sentiment or the human sentiment of learning, right? There's one side of it. I think the other side of it is the organization side. And when you said purpose, the purpose of the firm will be to, of course, increase revenue, create a social impact. PwC itself is a part of the Viksit Bharat campaign that Mr. Modi is running in the country today. So a lot gets dependent on what the environment is asking you to do and the purpose of the firm to fulfill, right? So let's say it's a capitalist world and you're wanting to grow your firm and you're wanting to grow the organization. Then it automatically ramifies into a head of HR or a head of business assurance or a head of business development or learning for that matter to create solutions which fulfill that. You connect to that. Now, how do you connect to that? You will hire for the skills that will sell. You will train people for the skills that will get immediately deployed and have no bench. You will immediately enter into a layoff situation or anything which is not applicable. I mean, I may have a slightly divergent view on saying that a skill is redundant. I think the idea for investment is to quickly be nimble and retrain the person to be deployable and available again. So I think that purpose of investment into an individual has to be linked to a P&L and has to be linked to a bottom line from a purpose standpoint, at least from a business perspective. Now coming on to the employee perspective, from a career path. See, apprentice models, longevity I feel are a thing of the past, because it's the world of Insta Reels. That's the attention span we're talking about, and that's the attention span on careers itself. Yeah. I mean, I myself, and I think the panel, I can speak for them, we don't know after 5 years, we might be doing something completely different and radical, for all you know, right? I think so many nods here. So to predict for a 25-year-old or a 30-year-old, it is very difficult to straitjacket them and tell them that if you're a Java developer, you will remain that for the next 15 years. Ain't gonna happen. But the environment that you can give to that individual, which is to facilitate that trainings, skills, environment, career pathing, reward for performing well in that skill. I think that environment that you can give to the individual creates an ecosystem for a person, a human, to be convinced and say, okay, I am doing something right now. Maybe in 3 years' time, at least my environment gives me a cut through and a roadway to move into something else. And then, of course, all that is, and that nimbleness and that ecosystem is then connected to the firm, which is largely making a goal of making money and making economics and, doing business. So it's a workflow, it's a waterfall model, right? And everybody is then connected. And then communication helps. I think people like us are the, I call it Sutradhar. We are the catalysts of that environment. We are not breadwinning. Yeah. and we are not the employee. We end up bridging both the parties together to create that ecosystem and communicate to people and tell them, don't think 100 years, don't think 30 years, at least think next 5 years, make value. Don't worry, I'm going to create an environment for you to quickly morph yourself into something else, which is going to be a future skill.
Yeah.
So I think that's the...
And just to add on what Shirin said, we have seen with multiple of our customers and one of large customers in India, tech company, where they have how beautifully they were able to align this whole business alignment with the people is because, to today's word, first of all, nobody wants to just do learning for the sake of learning. Earlier were the days, in our early days, when you used to go to a class, so it was more of either a fun time or off time, right, as a training and learning. But today, it has to be very purposeful, driven for that individual and to the organization. Now, how beautifully you can do it is really looking at that what kind of people you need, in the coming 6 months, a year, 2 years, and all of that kind of thing, where there is technology. There's still an ambiguity, but there is still the ideas, right? And you start creating those paths, because when you start building up or reskill or upskill people for these newer roles, it takes time. It's not like watching some 4 videos and you are skilled there. So when you create those kind of programs and ecosystem, what Shirin was sharing, and then let people opt for it, because they will only learn what they really decide for themselves, and then give them that opportunity and give them an assurance saying that because you will have roles coming in and these people are going through the path, that they have a job which will obviously grow them in profile, money, whatever. And that's how you can merge some of these things.
Maybe just one last thought to augment that, and again talking business economics and the environment here. The average age for our country today, as per our Indian statistics, is about 27, which is fantastic. It's a gold mine, right? And imagine the kind of talent. And about 50% of us are educated, and around 40-45% of us are specially educated for specific skills. And in 2047 is where the country is headed to from a Viksit Bharat standpoint. And I keep saying that because that's been the motto of a lot of organizations today, connected policies, government, your regime is connected to that. The average age is going to be 37, which is also going to be fairly young, and this is latest statistics from the India census. So having said that, look at that kind of investment that we can make in this talent pool and the huge market cap that we have for organizations like yours to tap into them and provide an offering to the world. I mean, in international global firms like yours, and where you are service providers to global firms and firms like us which are doing a lot of domestic work. I think the leverage around using and tapping into this talent is a huge investment pool that we have to get into, and one should not really ignore, because the mindset in firms is still that what's been working will work also in future. But I think it's high time that the industry and the world needs to reorganize themselves and start thinking and being a little more sensitive to go granular and start investing in what is needed and what is sold in the market.
So what we did in Infogain was, we realized this. So for L&D function was more of a back-end function. Yeah. Last few years, we realized that it is actually one of the business enablement function for us. So how do we align to the right perspective, where you have one side push-based, which is the capitalist perspective, and the pull-based, which is more about the employee's perspective. Now we said that, what are we selling? Let's look at the SFDC first. And that's where the funnel sits for us. At the funnel level, what kind of skill? Ultimately, IT services company, you're selling skills. I'll not say you're selling people, because we don't sell people, we sell skills, right? People really are the instrument in terms of making that happen, or we are selling solutioning. Now we looked at the SFDC, what kind of skills do we need? What is our internal repository, or the talent distribution across different skills, and where the gap is, so that we proactively start to work towards building those skill gaps. And that's where we started looking at the push-based learning interventions. Now, pull-based is, what we did was, we created, because of pandemic, we thought it's important that we need to, as a tech company, we always experiment building our own platforms, right? And that's where sometimes the partners have problems, that all IT companies, they want to do everything their own. Yeah. So we created the excellence platform. We said that the role-based learning path will be created on the platform for every single person, including the content, etc. We have people who are SMEs, they design all of that. And we said that pull-based is for employees to choose from. The push-based is company interest-based, so that your skills are always moving and really relevant from the future readiness perspective. That's how we manage it, actually.
Nice. And I wanted to give an example from the S&P context, because our philosophy as people forward is really about the fact that, again, keeping the economics of it at the back of your mind, the reality is that it's about creating enabling ecosystems today. And the pace of development of that ecosystem is so fast that you have to pump in several millions of dollars if you have to stay cutting edge on every single thing. So what is the approach that we've adopted at S&P? This is what I absolutely love. It is recognizing that we have to provide different strokes for different folks, and that's where the investment in a learning ecosystem. S&P is one of a handful of global companies that has a standing career coaching team within the organization, available for every single one of our colleagues globally. It doesn't matter what level, it doesn't matter what functional context or business context. If you want to have a career coaching conversation, not only is your people leader and your skip level manager available, you have career coaches who are certified coaches to work with. One example. Two, we've created what we call the Edge Learning Ecosystem, which is our repository of learning. So we've got essential tech for tech learning, AI tech for AI specific learning. We've got Create, which is for people leader specific learning. We've got tie-ups with a lot of platforms that give access to best-in-class programs. We've got a tie-up with a provider called Big Think Plus, which is about bite-sized learning content in video form. So you go learn how you want to. And to take it one step further, we said that because it will be difficult for us singularly to be cutting edge on everything, let's also tap into our ecosystem. So what have we done? Every single employee in the company has a learning budget and a learning allowance.
Sure.
You work with your people leader, and if there's a certification externally or a program externally which is necessitated by business impact, not just for today but maybe in the context of where you are growing towards, and is business relevant and tapped into your purpose, go outside and do that and leverage the learning allowance. It's creating that ecosystem that helps you ensure relevance, because at the end of the day, I truly feel that there are certain skills that are coming more and more in focus, some that are becoming table stakes, but some that we also have to unlearn if we have to relearn and learn new skills to remain relevant.
No, thank you for those insights. You know, Ankur, we have been talking a lot about AI as well. In your previous answer also, you were talking about AI. We have been talking about creating a learning ecosystem, right? So my two questions, like first, how can we sort of create that safe and secure learning ecosystem, first of all? You're talking about Casey as well, so if you can explain that. And also, how is AI changing the game for companies? You know, how is AI helping us to create those sort of personalized experiences and maintaining the balance between the business and the personal?
Absolutely. And just to add on what Bhavna was sharing, right, more about the ecosystem, right? And you have different set of things because you are talking about really multimodalities. You are really talking about every learner is different, right? And how you really get this through a patchwork, because what we have seen is that over a period of time, you have the best of the breed technologies and you end up getting a patchwork kind of thing, or you kind of built up a ecosystem which works a lot more seamlessly. And that's where Skillsoft movement was, from being a pure digital learning content library to a corporate learning, strategic learning provider, where we have not just the digital learning and bite-sized learning you can have, but long certifications, to a very interactive learning, to the kind of benchmarks which you can do, to the kind of, Casey, which you talked about, and I'll talk about that, to the coaching things, right? And things like everything has to be one, because as that individual or a manager or as a leader, whether it's a HR leader or a business leader, you have to really look at what kind of skill repository or inventory which I have and what I need, and how I have to move these people, right, from an organizational perspective to come back. But specifically talking about Casey, I think Gen AI, while in our Percipio platform, we are using AI for a long years. Obviously, Gen AI comes in and it becomes suddenly a new thing and everything becomes ChatGPT, but it is much beyond, right? Because while Gen AI is something which is communication tool and that's behaving like a human, so I was alluding to earlier, right, as well, that you have now a safe place to work or safe place to learn, where you really go into different modes and different skills, because you can be a first-time manager, you can be a leader, you're doing something on DEI, right? You can have different scenarios and deep down specific areas. That's where you start. And then you have a role play, because the other person might be, how you will learn, because you will have somebody who's accepting, who might be dismissive, who might be a rebellion, right? So if you have those scenarios, how will you learn? Because a lot of times people don't really open up with people because they have a fear that should I open up to my colleague or my manager or a skip level or where I should learn this, right? And that can only happen with that 70%. Now that 70% is kind of also getting into, and I personally feel that that 70% is eating up a little bit by that safe place to work where you start learning like a job you're doing. And that gives you, kind of a feedback which kind of gives you a learning path and all that. So I think that's where we are kind of going from a learning perspective, but how this whole thing is within one ecosystem. Because ultimately what we are really looking at is a very personalized approach, right, for that individual, which might be from the, I would say the interactivity perspective, which might be from a multimodality perspective, which might be how much time I have. Should I be doing, goal streaks? I've been a runner, now I'm not running. But what drove me to run 650 days non-stop was my goal streak, right? Which I started with 30 days in COVID, became 100, became 200, and then aspirational become 365. So lot of such things, and I ended up doing it till the time I actually got COVID after 650 days, and it stopped, right? So lot of things. We are human, right? We get driven through a lot of this, you can so-called say gamification, the drive, and then that becomes your identity. And you live with that identity, right? So I think that's where, and Rajiv, to your point, I think it has to be driven from the top, right? Because as a culture, it's always come. It is never grassroots. It is always from the top. When we were deploying this whole AI, and we obviously use ourselves, our CMO was the first person to actually go and do most of these AI courses. And it is not about just the AI as from a skill perspective that yes, there are foundational courses and you can start doing for everybody. But then you have to go deeper that what does AI means for a marketer? What does AI means for a HR? What does it means for a developer, right? And go deeper into those scenarios. And that's where you will start getting that benefit. While there is a set of foundation, and that foundation was a lot more bigger, which is kind of reducing because that's part of life today, right? Everybody uses Azure or ChatGPT or Gemini or whatever, right, on a day-to-day basis. So I think the future is how you start living along with it. It's not a replacement of something. It is not doing job replacement. I think it is enriching your job, and that's how we have to treat it.
We have been talking about AI skills, we've been talking about digital skills a lot, right? I can feel that all of you have multiple perspectives to different topics. And at this point in time, I want to bring in soft skills, right? We have been talking about digital skills. Everyone is kind of doing their sort of upskilling efforts for digital skills, for AI skills, making their workforce ready for the AI-enabled world. But how to strike that right sort of balance in your upskilling initiatives between digital and soft skills, the power skills, right, as we were talking about. So maybe we can have a perspective from you, Bhavna.
Sure, Hemanshi. I don't like the term soft skills at all. And the reason I don't like that term is because there's nothing soft, there's nothing nebulous about them. Actually, when you think about, and let's define it, let's bring in a little more definition. When we talk about these skills, what are we talking about? We're talking about critical thinking. We're talking about problem solving. Yeah. We're talking about connecting the dots. We're talking about collaboration. Yeah. We're talking about big picture thinking. Yeah. We're talking about leveraging the power of the ecosystem to unlock value. We're talking about design thinking. None of these is soft. Yeah. Each one of these is tangible. Actually, this is what the edge is. Yeah, absolutely. You think about it, when you're hiring, if you have 3 candidates who are at the same level of technical expertise, this is where the differentiation happens, right? When you're looking at promotions, this is definitely something that gets factored in. I think the investment in this area is something that organizations are making in different ways and to different extents. But to a large extent, for a really long time, this was that, that classical workshop that you would go to, a 1-day workshop on time management, a 2-day program management skills workshop, etc. I'll come back again to what Rajiv spoke about, which is 70-20-10. Skills are about knowledge and application and impact. We always forget the impact piece, right? Today, you know, it's very important. If you're investing $1, that $1 has to give you significant return, not just in the short term, but also longitudinally for it to be a relevant investment, right? Now, let me play that back and say that we don't have to do a very complicated thing to know why investment in past skills is relevant. Just look at the edge of the organization in driving innovation. Just look at the fungibility of the organization to bounce back from setbacks, right? Or to bounce back from unforeseen developments or headwinds that are a reality in industry, right? All of these are testament to the past skills that you're developing within the ecosystem. I know that at S&P, this is, we have consciously called these past skills because we believe that these enable and empower people. What we also really strongly advocate is skills in action, right? So when you are really thinking about, we did away with a rating system as part of our performance philosophy a while ago, right? Our performance philosophy is called Thrive, because we believe it's about enabling people to really live their potential to the fullest and balance enterprise purpose, divisional objectives, team objectives with individual purpose. And as part of that, when we look at Thrive check-ins that happen on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, the intent is also focus on future development. That development could be, what do you need to do to be successful here? What do you need to be successful in your next gig? Or along with what you are doing, is there something that you want to do on the side? Is there a stretch program? Is there a gig project we can put you on? Is there a secondment that we can think of you? And for you to be eligible for those, what are those past skills that we need to bring on, right? We are living in the age of fluid opportunity marketplaces. And for that, this investment in past skills is crucial. Right? Because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. The true differentiator of people, at one time it used to be cognitive intelligence, then it became cognitive intelligence and emotional intelligence. Today, cognitive and emotional are foundational, but the true differentiator is learning intelligence. And I think organizations are making that move to invest.
Yeah, you know, Shirin, how, as she talked about that, we are moving towards that approach. But when we are talking about, see, skills first is the overarching theme that we have all been talking about, the approach, the skills first approach. You know, how are you sort of ensuring that culture in your organizations, or how organizations can do that to build a culture where capabilities are prioritized more than traditional credentials?
Yeah, no, I think, thanks for asking that. And in fact, we're at a very good cusp in our organization, because we're going through, like Rajiv mentioned, we're also going through a complete L&D transformation in our organization. Learning was reactive, learning was client-based, learning was leadership-oriented, programs-oriented, role transition-oriented, which is quintessential legacy. Every firm does that. But I think then we realized there was a huge gap between what we were getting from the market or from campuses or as fresh talent and what was actually needed to work for a client in terms of interface. There's a huge gap. Our deployment numbers were showing at 50%, 60% deployment in the 5th month, 6th month. And that's a huge gap, right? I mean, I can't have a bench or a holding for me in the organization for 4-5 months. And that's impact, because now I have to reduce that. That's increasing billability, creating P&L and impact in the organization. How do I do that? We've introduced a learning academy. We'll christen it with a nice word, but it's a learning academy that we've introduced for every and any new hire that walks into the organization. And there is a common minimum aptitude that this person has to develop right from -60 of the day joining to the +30 of the organization. Yeah. So for those 90 days, we will expose this person to, let's say, 5 or 7 different pods of learning. Those 5 or 7 pods of learning will be productivity, will be our internal consulting skills, will be will be around efficiency from the market, current crisis and trends. It'll be around how you're consulting ready, how to dress in front of a client, as basic as that. So on the 30th day, when the person is through with the induction, is through with everything, imagine the kind of readiness the person will be and the employee will be, whether from campus or raw or intern or apprentice or a lateral from market at an associate or a senior associate level. Imagine the readiness and the equipness the person will have to be in front of the client. Yeah. And I'm very sure, and I'm sort of challenging myself on this, that I will be able to sort of get that impact of getting the deployment numbers, faster and get people ahead in terms of the market. So what does that do for me? That actually creates the, like you said, it creates the environment where I'm now predicting and creating future ready skills for people and getting the organization ready. So it's not radical. This is not something radical. I mean, other big service providers in the company, IT companies in the country have done it at a very large scale, at a university level. But in our environment, which is consulting services, we have to also be nimble. It's also about looking inwards in terms of saying, what is the market needing? See, we will mirror the skills which client needs. What is our skill? Consulting is a broad skill, right? So we will have skills which the client needs, what you need today, and maybe what your firm also needs as a client at some way in the stage. So having said that, it's also about refreshing that every 6 months to see what can be added and removed. And the third attribute of that being in the environment is the metrics and the measurement of that individual to the people manager. So then the people manager can, and that's all Gen AI and automation based, because then the people manager can easily know that this person's proficiency level in the top 10 skills is so much, and this person is maybe A client ready or B client ready. Yeah. So imagine the kind of swiftness that it creates in the system and the impact for business.
No,
so that's what we're trying to do.
No, agreed. And if you really look at, I think these are the programs which a lot of these large IT companies start running in college and all that. I think the difference it is becoming is that one, the definition of managerial training, those 8 different topics with 4 hours each kind of thing has gone. Right? It is about, this is your role, these are the kind of skills you have, where you are, and what is required, right? And what level you are. Because for AI, for a front desk employee, it might be just a foundational skill. But for a leader in AI, it might be how to lead, impact in an AI world versus a developer, which might be, how to code it with AI. So it might be very, very different, and what level of skill you require, and that whole personalization which it brings. And that is possible with today's technology. Yeah. And I think that brings that impact a lot more faster, because there are certain set of basics which you have to keep on doing. But then where you are, because I will get bored if I know already something and you throw me another 3 hours of training for the same versus I need 30 minutes. Right? And that's a world we are living in.
Yeah, I think the other thing on this piece is the availability, right? We spoke adoption, we spoke pull. The availability of it. The virtual environment helps us do a lot. Yeah. I mean, all this that I'm talking about, the 90 days exposure of an individual coming in is all virtual. We have 7 different vendors who are training an individual, and it's an uptake that the employee should have. It's a push because the manager is going to measure and see that if everything is done or not. But it's all virtual. So imagine the outreach. I mean, I have a churn of 10,000 people every year walking in and walking out of the company. And that's my outreach, because I don't want real estate for it. I don't want any kind of infrastructural spend. But the environment and vendors that we have in the environment, like yours and maybe the others, that give us a foundation, to complete that outreach. And I'm okay with the 20% drop rate. Doesn't matter. At least I educated the workforce in the country.
You were rightly talking about measurement, like measuring the impact of these initiatives. And I'll come back to this question in a while. But before that, I'll come to you, Rajiv. See, you're coming from a tech-driven world, right? We are currently dealing with talent war, right? We need to constantly upgrade the skills, because at the end of the day, we have seen multiple reports that, of course, salary is one motivation, but skills, the culture, the approach of the company is also a reason for the employees to stay back, right? So how are you sort of building that culture while future-proofing your talent and, making your talent more agile and adaptable? The 2 keywords in this season, right?
Yeah, agile and adaptable, and also resilience. Yeah. Because that all came from this pandemic-based word we got into, and eventually that's how people started to adapt and have been demonstrating resiliency as well. I think it's a very interesting question. There's no easy answer to it as well. You can't actually train people to be adaptable, for example. You can't train people to be agile. You can only create an ecosystem which is enabling all of that from experience perspective, from leadership behaviors perspective. Now, as an IT organization, I've seen within my organization itself and as a whole industry, I've seen we started as IT services companies, then R&D engineering services, OPD space came in, where we said, okay, IP doesn't belong to us, IP belongs to the customer, but we will develop the product. Then we saw aspects of RPA, we saw mobility, we saw automation, some part of AI, we saw design, all that started to coming in. Now we're talking about the disruption from complete GI standpoint, and we are calling it, AI-led disruption in tech space. Now, all this, which I just talked about, meaning is, what it means is adaptability. Which as an organization, you at one stage talked about waterfall. We don't talk about waterfall. We say iterative, agile, right? Because you need to keep looking at what are you doing and seeing whether it is in the context of time or not, in the context of requirement or not, and then iterate, go back, keep revisiting, and then working on it so that your final product is relevant from an industry standpoint. The same thing happens with the corporate. Now today, the language which has changed for us also, we were in one of the meetings and somebody was sharing that in the delivery process, we have introduced this automation workflow. And the CEO asked, where is AI in this? That's the adaptability.
Yeah,
now,
and most of the AI organizations are not even making money.
Yeah, right.
The big AI organizations, but we know that they're going to make money in the next few years, which is why we are using it.
I carefully follow these days the financial reports which keep coming. So Accenture is the only company which declared 1 billion revenue coming in from AI. No other. So, all the companies are in that space where they're either doing prototyping, doing some design thinking workshop-led initiative, making some money. But that's very little of their revenue. Nothing like 1 billion as Accenture proudly talking about it in their balance sheet. Now, from that context, if AI is the focus, as an organization, how adaptable are you? Are you waiting for others to actually take the lead and then follow? Then you're gone. You're out of the business. Because what's happening is right now it's very slow moving. One point will come and it will pivot and disruption will happen. And that would mean two things. One, companies which have not embraced that will have a struggle to survive. And two, this would also mean that the efficiency will come to play. Because ultimately what's going to be the advantage of AI? Efficiency, cost efficiency. You don't need so many people. Your cost of production will go down irrespective of what industry you come from. Now you will have a sustainable problem again. So one is you are out of the game, and second, there is somebody else who is pitching in for your business as your competition, providing the same service or product at a lesser cost. So that's going to be the big problem statement. So are you agile and adaptable enough to start working in that direction starting from this point itself? That's how I see it. It's an ecosystem, it's a leadership vision that will drive the adaptability and agility. And of course, you can actually provide checks and balances in your hiring process or in your promotions progression process to see that you have right leaders as well as right people coming on board who have these behaviors when you can find BI or behavioral simulation based. Correct.
In the world of AI, there's a lot of ambiguity, right? We still don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. And perhaps Ankur can explain well on how AI is sort of changing the landscape a bit when it comes to the upskilling initiatives.
So yes, if you really look at, I think there is a lot of talk already happened around it, that when you start looking at personalization, you start looking at curation, right? And there was a lot of manual work which a L&D or a HR team used to do, right? Or as a manager, I will figure out, oh, these are the gaps and these are the courses which my team members used to do. A lot of that has gone. How you take it to a scale, right? With the complexity of having one ecosystem or a seamless ecosystem and experience, and still give that benefit to the learner, which is aligned to the aspirations of that individual, and it is helping the organization, because whatever you are doing in the corporate learning world has to impact, right? We all know, because the signing of the check has to happen, right? So I think that's where AI is helping. I think it is helping in terms of identifying that gap a lot more faster to the system. The real-time feedbacks it can get in, right? The kind of scenarios of Casey, which I kind of talked about, one of them, and even predicting future a little bit, right? I think Shirin did talk about that you have to really looking at the market conditions. Now you can go and start really looking at a lot of data points and then get an analysis very quickly. Because as a World Economic Forum obviously is predicting, saying these are the kind of top 10 skills in 2025, top in 2030. Now those are the skills, and unfortunately none of them are very technical and aligned to the role. If you really look at the top 10 roles which are coming for 2030 versus the skills, they're not directly matching. But those are the core fundamental skills. And 8 of them are actually those human power skills, I don't also love.
Prompt engineer as a role, isn't
Yes.
it brilliant?
And what is the engineering about it? I'm being an engineer, but
Prompt engineer.
right? But on the other side, I think you have to start really looking at those are the which I think Bhavna did mention so many of them, and those are the behavioral changes because those becomes basics for the newer roles which are coming in, and a lot of them are unknown as well. So I think AI is playing in that way from predicting a future which is very ambiguous on one side, obviously looking at a lot of data because we are living in a world where the data will be get outsourced. Data work will be get outsourced to AI, right? You don't need that much of it.
It's fantastic. I was at a training last week in South Korea in Seoul, and we finished the training session, and everybody put post-its on the board, right? Like you do in a session, who thinks about this, and post-its on the board. And I pulled out my enterprise ChatGPT app, and I just clicked they were all summarizing on the board. And I clicked a picture, and I just said, summarize this picture for me. It just gave me a beautiful download of the 7 cohorts that came out of those post-its, 8 points under each of it that came out. And on top of it, it also asked me, do you want a deeper insight on any of the topics? So look at that beautiful outcome that it saved my time on analyzing that. One, that's efficiency. Second, it brought out the it brought various parts of insights together of the world to give me intercepts and theme-based outcomes. And lastly, it also gave me a little edge to say, do you want more? Do you want more? Do you want more? So efficiency, capability, future, and time savingness, why not? I mean, it's lovely. I mean, I can always augment my own human brain with it. But it's lovely.
No, I think those human skills, and the human skills, what were happening earlier in a lot of these meetings is the intelligence of these people. And then obviously Google came in and you start getting some inputs, right, by a search. Now all that is there and you are using the best of it. So when you do benchmark, you are not benchmarking between me and Shirin on a particular skill. You might be benchmarking with the best of the people on that particular skill globally. So that's the benefit which it brings.
So I'm going to give you one more example, and I'm going to build on what Shirin said. So we have Spark Assist internally, which does all of this. So it's embedded into every part of whatever you want to do, right? So analytics, summarization, right? There are such amazing Sparks that have been created and they are available in a library that people can use to do different kinds of value add. One really interesting one, so we use psychometric insights, right, within the organization, and there is a plug that is there. So I can write emails to people using Spark Assist support today, but there is a plug where I can also leverage the psychometric input to actually customize the emails to say that this person has this attribute, this is your attribute, this is a conflict situation. Do you want to tailor this to have these 3 elements? Now that is about one true value add could be how do we take relationship intelligence to a whole new level, because you have someone who's enabling that entire journey for you a lot more real time. So personalization at scale, this is an example of that.
We were talking about digital skills and power skills. Perhaps we don't realize at the end of the day we are also living in an AI enabled world, and we need AI skills also, right, to sustain in this world. Even those skills are important. AI is perhaps predicting a lot of other skills, but what about those skills that you need to train AI or you need to be friends with AI at the end of the day, right? But we had a lot of discussion on AI and skills first approach already, and as we are wrapping up this conversation, I want to talk about measurability. We are launching a lot of upskilling efforts, like you talked about measurability. How are we sort of measuring the impact of those upskilling efforts? What are those KPIs? What are those metrics when we talk about the ROI? Because at the end of the day, the objective of the business is to do business, right? Maybe we'll start with you.
So one point I already mentioned, right? The impact that as a leader I can bring about is to impact the P&L, increase deployability with skills, have more applicable skills. Secondly, make the world more efficient in terms of the time and money spent in learning, because ultimately you want efficiency and faster ways of learning. So technology and automation based report cards, all this will help me do more with the same manpower in the team. So I think that's my second impact. For an employee, the impact is of course based on their KPIs, learning hours, how much are they investing in their own skills, how quickly are they able to sort of adapt to new clients, new accounts, new skill sets, and that measurability comes in. And then for a people leader, which is, we're all from, world of commodity where people are the commoditized skill. I think for a people manager, it becomes very important to impact the measure of their people performance for using those skills. I mean, how well is my cohort, and look at it as a small ecosystem. How well oiled is my cohort from a trainability standpoint, from a deployability standpoint, from a readiness for future, attrition, retention, so those metrics all add up to a particular manager to say, has that worked or not worked? So I think different cohorts, but ultimately you need a measure for sure.
Ankur, yeah, no, absolutely. And to that point, Ankur, you've been working with a lot of organizations, right? What are those KPIs and metrics that organizations must use? I'm not talking about that they are already using. They must use to kind of measure the impact of their upskilling initiatives. No, and do you think that learning hours should be used to measure the impact? That is the debate.
So you got to standardize at scale. Is my thought, you got to standardize at scale, because otherwise, like I said, mild democracy works, but sometimes you can't be too democratic.
Yes, no, agreed. And I know Shirin covered a lot of those points, because you are measuring for whom. I think that becomes very important, right? And what is that impact? Because ultimately learning has to create that impact. Whether it is coming to that individual that, oh, I'm growing, I've got this certification, all of that measurability from learning hours perspective. Maybe traditionally learning L&D department used to think about that, oh, how many learning hours, how much that. But from a business perspective, I think people have obviously started with the top line, bottom line, efficiencies, lot of those. And that means very different thing for different set of companies or organizations or industry, I would say, right? You did talk about an example of, these new hires kind of coming in, and I have to get the billability rate faster, or their. Now, that's what we have started seeing, that learning is not happening just for the sake of learning. Learning is happening a lot more through initiatives. And different department, different people have different set of initiatives, right? And that is where the measurements makes it the most impact, to convince management that this is working. Because everybody has to be looking at that, this is the benefit which I'm getting. And that's how the metrics start coming in. So obviously there are business metrics to it. Learnability, obviously there are softer sides of it and all of that kind of thing, but then there are learning hours and all of that. Yeah, these are some, base benchmarks which you just put it, like a compliance training, which you have to go through. But I would say that people don't really get the sign check or the investment in L&D by just doing this basics. I think it is that.
For sure.
I'm going to give you 3 examples very specifically in my view. One, I believe customer satisfaction is directly an outcome of the quality of your upskilling, right? So there's no reason why customer satisfaction, your CSAT, whatever it is, should not be directly linked to quality of learning. That's example 1. Example 2, your fluid or liquid workforce, which has been upskilled so that you can leverage them not just in their day jobs, but you can leverage them in gigs or projects that you want to run across the organization. Now, the benefit of this is this taps into the organization's need to have ready talent, because this is talent that has the skills, that knows the culture, that knows the ways of working. It also ties into the employee's need to have variety, to upskill, to see growth in multiple ways, right? And diverse experiences is core to growth, right? So this is the second example that I want to give. The third example that I want to give around impact that comes through learning is the risks that you take in terms of your cross-functional task forces and your SWAT teams and your tag teams that you pull together to deliver on real business impact. Do you struggle as an organization to say, I need this skill? Do you go to the same people repeatedly, or do you have a wider pool? So the way you look at your talent pool and deploy your talent pool, gone are the days that it was only about A players. Today, B players are as critical. And by the way, C players may also just be in the wrong context, and therefore can you enable them to make them B players or A players in another context? So 3 examples that I want to add.
Thank you so much. And in lieu of time, we'll have to end this conversation. But what a beautiful ending. See, we started talking about the whole digital landscape, the evolution, the future-ready workforce, future-proofing the talent, and now we are stopping this conversation at how to measure the impact of everything we talked about in this panel. Well, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for being a part of this panel. What a beautiful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our viewers, stay tuned for more such videos only at Skillsoft presents ETStudio's HRConnect in association with ETHR World.